Hello everybody, day 4 of our whistle-stop tour of orchestral programming, and today we're looking at about a really interesting question about the size of the section. Obviously you can have samples of 18 violins playing together, you can have a sample of 6 violins playing together, or a solo violin, and they all sound completely different, and you need to use, wherever possible, the right size of section for what you're trying to do. The problem a lot of the time, why can't I just have 150 French horns or something? Because it doesn't, if your aim at the end of the day is to make it sound realistic, then that's just not what an orchestra normally sounds like. And when you listen to your final arrangement, you think, why doesn't it sound realistic? Because, and if we take this as an example, here's a perfectly nice VSL, Vienna Symphonic Library, special edition clarinets. Now this is a sample of 3 clarinets playing at the same time. Okay, sounds great. Now if you play a chord, however, how many clarinets are you listening to if there's 3 per note? Yeah, there's 9 clarinets. Have you ever seen an orchestra with 9 clarinets? Apart from Mahler, have you seen an orchestra with 9 clarinets? No, it doesn't. It's just not. It's not how it normally works. So if you start playing big chords with articulation, with samples which are of more than one instrument, then you're going to essentially what's called the pipe organ effect, and you can hear it in particularly woodwind and brass. And so, for example, sometimes you think, it just sounds so great when you've got lots and lots and lots of brass. So let's try an example with trombone ensembles from Berlin Brass. Here we go. So this is the ensemble, which I think it's got 3 in it. So if I'm playing a 4-note chord, that's the sound of 12 trombones. Now that might be a sound you want and you like, but is it realistic? If you want it to sound realistic and you want to hear each individual instrument, you need to use a solo instrument instead of an ensemble. So if we do the same thing, that's what that phrase would sound like played by 4 trombones, 1 on each note. Normally you'd have 3. And what you get with that is you get the sort of little crackle and you hear the individual instrument, and strangely that sounds more, it cuts through more. Often you get, the more, particularly with brass and woodwind, but the more instruments you put on each note, the more woolly the whole thing sounds, until it goes on go the sunglasses of doubt, because I personally don't like that sound. Now, there are times where actually having more is a really good thing. So let's give you another example. Let's move into the world of strings. Here's exactly the same sequence played by, first of all, symphonic strings. These are all, so we've got symphonic strings, chamber strings, and solo strings. Symphonic strings, this is a violin section. I suspect it's probably 18. 18 is first violins is fairly standard for a large orchestra. That's 18 playing. This is chamber strings, which is normally around 6 to 8. It's a much smaller sound. And here's solo strings, which is obviously 1. Completely different sound as you go through the sections. Now, suppose you only had a big ensemble sound and you've got a solo string as well. What you can do is you can layer one on top of the other. So let's start by just having the symphonic string and then add a little bit of solo string into it. You hear that balance between the two gives you that kind of extra little bit of edge, and it sort of draws your ear so that you can hear an individual instrument amongst a section. So it's a way of making a big symphonic section sound smaller. and that works extremely well. Another thing you can do with this is strings layer up very well indeed, so you don't have to have you don't have to worry quite so much about the density of the sound and how they combine, because brass and woodwind don't always combine particularly well when you try and layer them up, but strings definitely do. So you can, for example, take those chamber strings or those symphonic strings and layer them together. If, however, bear in mind what I was saying about the chords earlier, and how you're getting the pipe organ effect. If we take the chamber strings, where are they? Come over here, my friends. Hello. Oh, Guy. There's longs. Okay, so if we're saying that with these violins we got 6 on each note, you can use chamber strings as though it's divisi. So what we've actually got is a section of 12 there, because we've got 6 and 6. Or if we wanted a third note, that would be what an 18 strong first violin section would sound like, divided 3 ways. So you can use chamber to do that as well. And Berlin strings is really, really good for that as well, because it's the original Berlin strings, not the symphonic version, but the original Berlin strings is quite a small section. And so for when you're playing those kind of chords and areas where you would divisi the sound, this section, you get that effect, and it sounds great, and it sounds really, really good. So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to be aware of the size of the section and the effect it has on your overall sound. Now, not everybody is fortunate enough to have chamber, symphonic, and solo, and all the rest of it, but you can also achieve some of this by careful use of mic positions, and we're going to go on and talk about that tomorrow. There's just one other thing which I'd like to talk about before we wrap this one up for today, and that's how you can layer together different articulations. Let me get up an instance of, let me get Berlin strings back. I like Berlin. And they've got some really nice stuff in there, which, here we go, Berlin strings. Okay, so we're going to put dynamics in, violin 1 dynamics and violin 1 longs. Now, dynamics, it works like this. It's a recording. The actual sample is a recording of players making a dynamic movement. So in other words, it's not done on the mod wheel and all that malarkey. It's this. Doesn't that sound lovely? And look, you've got dozens of these different things here. And it just sounds so much more real. Because it is! It's real. Real players doing this and actually expressing themselves through their instrument, you know, shock horror, sounds better than me moving my mob wheel up and down. Oh, who would have thought it? I know. So what you can do is, if we put in a chord of C minor, here we go, C minor. I don't want to do that dynamic movement. I'm going to let the players do it for me. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer this up. So let me just mute these strings off first of all. So we're going to go. Now, what we want is a little swell on the end there. So when we get to that note, I'm going to layer that sound on the top. And you get a more natural sound. Now we can go one stage further with this, and we can add, let's get a little sort of marcato start to the thing as well. What have we got here? Staccato spit port. I wonder if that will do it. Let's see if that one does it. Or just let's try putting a stack on the front, see if that works. What I'm doing here is, you can also do the same thing with the beginning of notes. So if we wanted to put a sort of more definite front on it. So that sounds really, so we're going to have to take the volume down of that a lot before that sounds remotely viable. So you just want a little extra edge. Okay, what's going on here? Why am I not hearing this? Okay. Okay, I don't know what's gone on here. Ah, there we go. Okay, so right, let's try and get this balanced up. A little bit less. A little bit less still. There, you see that? Just that little touch of the staccato on the front just gives it a bit more edge. So we're layering a little bit of staccato over the front. And then you get that nice swell at the end. So strings in particular, you can do this layering thing. You can also, but do be careful about just defaulting to the biggest ensemble you can find with brass and woodwind, because it'll sound like a school orchestra with 400 French horns all trying to play at the same time. And I can tell you from bitter experience, that is not a sound anybody wants to live through. So what I'd like to say is, go and experiment with all that. Download the PDF which is underneath this. Subscribe to the channel if you feel so engaged. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at the sound of the room and mic positions, which is another... I keep on saying everything's important because everything is. See you tomorrow.